A subdued warning has recently emerged from a nation that seldom raises its voice, and global markets are starting to notice the impact. Japan, the world's third largest economy and one of the most reliable industrial powers, has released indicators that many specialists hoped they would never see. These indicators are not loud, but they are precise. They point to difficulties forming out of sight. These difficulties are tied directly to the United States and the future of global production. Many people believe the U.S. manufacturing sector is heading for a powerful resurgence. But new statistics, government actions, and changes within Japan's factories are telling a different account. A story that exposes weaknesses in a system that was thought to be unshakable. In this broadcast, you will discover why Japan's recent caution has caused alarm among financial experts worldwide. You will grasp how a reduction in Japan's output is linked to more significant problems in the U.S. economy, particularly in industries that rely on international supply networks and steady foreign allies. You will observe how reduced orders, falling export needs, and policy mistakes are combining to cause a chain reaction that may drive the United States toward an industrial slump much faster than anticipated. You will also learn about several lesser-known events inside Japan that rarely get noticed, such as swift reductions in high-tech manufacturing, urgent government revisions of factory forecasts, and hidden financial pressure among large companies that provide components to American corporations. As we examine this situation, you will realize how Japan's warning is more than just an economic bulletin. It is a sign that the international system built on cooperation, reliable trade, and mutual growth is beginning to transform. Some of these changes are subtle and some are direct, but all of them have lasting consequences. You will also comprehend why experts claim that the caution from Japan is not aimed at the world broadly. It is aimed specifically at the United States because Japan's economic vitality is closely connected to American consumption, American regulatory choices, and American access to overseas production capability. Stay with this broadcast until the finish because the final segments reveal how these developments could impact everyday life in the United States. From the price of essential items to the stability of supply chains, from factory employment to long-term global planning, the effect may be wider than many anticipate. You will also hear why some specialists say that this period could shape the next 10 years of global power balance and why ignoring Japan's alert could leave nations unprepared for the next stage of economic transformation. Welcome to our channel. If you appreciate detailed breakdowns, global perspective, and content that looks past the major headlines, be sure to subscribe and join us as we analyze the true story behind today's most crucial happenings. Japan's most recent manufacturing data indicates a sharp decrease that has caught many analysts off guard, and the figures show a reduction that is more profound than typical seasonal changes or temporary factory adjustments. Several major research organizations reported that production in vital sectors like car parts, machinery, and electronic components declined more quickly than expected. While the strategy is presented as an effort to protect domestic industries, it has notably affected Japan, whose export economy relies on easy entry to the U.S. market. These tariffs have increased the cost of Japanese products entering American ports, making items such as vehicles, precision machines, and high-tech components more costly for U.S. purchasers. For Japanese manufacturers that already operate on narrow profit margins, even a small rise in tariff pressure can hurt their competitiveness and compel companies to scale back shipments. This effect is felt most acutely in sectors where Japan is historically strong. Vehicle makers are facing higher fees on completed cars and specialized components. Electronics businesses, which supply parts to American consumer brands and industrial producers, are managing extra charges that disrupt long-standing contracts. Chip manufacturers, already under strain from global shortages and rising production costs, are now confronted with additional trade barriers that make it harder to maintain predictable export flows. These sectors form the core of Japan's industrial capability, meaning any pressure on them quickly spreads across the wider economy. Another rising concern among Japanese firms is the lack of predictability in U.S. trade decisions. Companies report that planning for long-term production cycles has become difficult because tariff regulations can change with minimal notice. Some exporters say they now hesitate to invest in new facilities or in large operations because they fear that future tariff adjustments could eliminate expected profits. Others are re-examining supply routes, noting that abrupt policy changes can leave shipments stranded, delayed, or unexpectedly taxed. This climate of uncertainty is compelling Japanese businesses to rethink their plans, adjust their schedules, and operate with a degree of caution that slows industrial momentum throughout the entire sector. Japanese officials have explicitly cautioned that ongoing tariff conflicts are not just causing friction between two major economies, but are threatening to undermine the broader global framework that keeps trade moving smoothly. Their message points to a risk that reaches far beyond falling export figures. They contend that when tariffs interfere with established supply networks, the effects impact every region that depends on shared production systems. Japan emphasizes that industries across Asia, Europe, and even North America could face rising expenses, slower deliveries, and increasing uncertainty if the tariff pressure continues. This warning is presented not as a political complaint, but as a technical evaluation based on decades of experience overseeing one of the world's most interconnected manufacturing systems. What makes this caution more serious is Japan's recognition that its current industrial decline is not the result of a short cycle or a temporary outside shock. Analysts within the country are increasingly describing the slowdown as systemic, meaning it is connected to deeper changes in technology, population trends, and global competition. Factory automation requires substantial investment, but older workforces and reduced domestic consumption limit the pace of adaptation. Key industries that once relied on consistent export growth are now facing stronger competition from South Korea, China, and Southeast Asia. Combined with tariff pressures from the United States, these structural weaknesses are becoming more apparent, exposing long-term vulnerabilities that cannot be resolved with simple policy tweaks. Because of these underlying issues, Japan is describing the current situation as a wake-up call for global manufacturers and investors. They urge companies to look closely at their risk exposure, supplier networks, and long-term strategies. Japanese policymakers warned that relying on old trade assumptions may no longer be safe, especially in a world where regulations can shift faster than businesses can adjust. Investors are being advised to understand that industrial stability in one major economy does not guarantee stability elsewhere. The message from Japan is that everyone involved in global production must be ready for an environment where risk is higher, policy certainty is lower, and the results of ignoring systemic changes could extend far beyond national borders. Japan's industrial health has long served as a vital indicator for the stability of global supply chains because many of the world's most advanced production systems rely on Japanese components. When Japan's factories operate well, manufacturers across Asia, Europe, and North America benefit from steady streams of precision parts, raw materials, and high-quality components. Economists often track Japan's industrial reports carefully because changes in its output tend to reveal early signs of stress within the international manufacturing network. Japan's crucial role in producing specialized machinery, car parts, advanced chemicals, and chip materials means any reduction in output inside the country quickly impacts the timing, cost, and reliability of later production in other regions. As Japanese output decreases, several essential sectors worldwide begin to feel the strain. The car industry is particularly exposed since Japanese firms supply crucial parts for engines, transmissions, electronics, and safety features. Even slight production cuts in Japan can lead to delays on assembly lines in other countries. The chip sector faces similar risks because Japan produces vital materials like photoresists, silicon wafers, and precision manufacturing tools that chip plants rely on. Electronics makers also heavily depend on Japan for sensors, micromotors, display parts, and high-grade metals. When Japan cuts back on output, companies across multiple continents must slow production, change orders, or look for replacements that often do not match Japanese quality or reliability. These weaknesses increase the chance of division within global supply chains. When countries cannot rely on stable suppliers, they start to move production find different sources, or build new domestic capabilities. While finding diverse sources can help reduce dependence, it also increases costs because changing supply routes requires new investments, new contracts, and new logistics systems. Rising costs then pass on to consumers, making products more expensive and limiting market stability. Global tensions can add further uncertainty since governments may react to supply interruptions with protective actions or new trade barriers. The more interconnected the manufacturing world becomes, the more easily instability in one major participant spreads across the entire system, creating a cycle of unpredictability that pushes countries to act defensively and reshapes the global economic scene. Japan's caution carries a broader message that goes beyond its own borders, because a slowdown in export-dependent economies often signals problems ahead for the United States as well. When nations like Japan begin to struggle, their capacity to purchase American goods weakens. This reduces overseas demand for U.S. machinery, industrial equipment, vehicles, and technology products. If multiple export-driven economies slow at the same time, the combined drop in orders can shrink the U.S. market much faster than many expect. Analysts observe that the U.S. relies significantly on foreign buyers to maintain growth in several key manufacturing areas. And when those partners pull back, American factories face reduced output, lower profits, and increasing job cuts. Japan's warning is therefore not just a statement about its own challenges, but a signal that global demand is softening in ways that could directly pressure the U.S. industrial base. The concept of a strong American industrial recovery is broadly discussed, but it is far from assured. Much of the manufacturing momentum in the United States relies on collaboration with foreign suppliers, joint ventures with overseas companies, and reliable access to imported components. If Japan, one of America's most important industrial partners, begins reducing production or refocusing on domestic stability, U.S. manufacturers may struggle to get the parts they require. This disruption could slow the building of new factories, delay major industrial projects, and weaken the effort to bring production back home. Some American firms are already dealing with higher costs for materials that were once affordable because they relied on Japanese suppliers. As these pressures build, the path to a sustained U.S. industrial comeback becomes more delicate. Another issue is the increasing use of protective measures such as tariffs, which are intended to strengthen domestic production, but often create unexpected consequences. When tariffs raise the cost for imported components, American factories pay more to build their products. This can make U.S. goods less competitive abroad, further reducing export demand at a time when global buyers are already cautious. Higher production costs inside the U.S. also lead to expensive finished goods, which can weaken domestic consumption. Over time, this creates a damaging loop. Tariffs disrupt partners like Japan. Weakened partners reduce their purchases of U.S. goods, and falling demand hurts American manufacturing even more. This loop illustrates why Japan's caution is being taken seriously by economists who believe that protectionism, while politically appealing, can destabilize both sides of the trade relationship. Japan is reacting to its growing industrial difficulties by changing how it participates in global production. One of its main strategies is diversifying supply chains to lessen vulnerability to sudden interruptions and unpredictable foreign regulations. Policymakers are working with major firms to move parts of their sourcing away from relying on a single country and toward a broader network that includes Southeast Asia, India, and parts of Europe. At the same time, Japan is encouraging companies to bring more manufacturing back home through programs that offer tax breaks, subsidies, and logistical help. These steps are meant to reduce reliance on export markets that have become unpredictable, especially where tariff risks threaten long-term planning. A major focus area is strengthening resilience in chips, a sector Japan sees as essential for its future competitiveness. The government is investing heavily in advanced chip materials, lithography parts, and next-generation fabrication technologies. Several domestic and foreign chip makers have announced new facilities or expansions in Japan, supported by government funding and strategic planning aimed at securing stable, high-quality production capacity. Alongside chips, Japan is speeding up the development of electric vehicle infrastructure. Automakers and energy companies are cooperating to expand charging networks, invest in battery technology, and support domestic battery supply chains that reduce dependence on overseas producers. These measures aim to ensure that Japan remains a key player in industries that will define the next phase of global manufacturing. Japan is also deepening partnerships and expanding investment agreements with nations that share its worries about supply chain stability. Joint ventures with US and European firms are being strengthened, while regional alliances with countries in Asia are being broadened to include technology transfer, shared research projects, and co-developed industrial centers. Some companies are channeling new money into domestic capacity upgrades, modern factory equipment, and automation systems to reduce labor shortages and boost output efficiency. By spreading production risk, reinforcing vital industries, and building stronger alliances, Japan is attempting to stabilize its industrial base while preparing for a future where reliability and resilience are more crucial than simply the volume of exports. Japan's message holds far more weight than a disagreement between two trading partners because the pressures it faces reveal a broader weakness in the global system. The decline in Japan's industrial output highlights a systemic vulnerability that affects every country connected to modern supply chains. When a highly developed manufacturing center begins to lose stability, it signals stress throughout networks that depend on precise coordination, shared technology, and predictable market behavior. This is why the situation cannot be seen as a simple trade argument. It reflects a systemic risk that touches industries from electronics to energy storage and global shipping. Global investors and manufacturers are being urged to pay close attention to these developments because Japan's slowdown is not an isolated event. Many of the industries where Japan plays a central role have no easy substitutes. A drop in Japanese output can disrupt production targets, delay new product launches, and increase costs for companies that rely on specialized materials and components. Investors who ignore these signals may underestimate the risk hidden inside their holdings, especially in sectors linked to car innovation, high-tech hardware, and industrial machinery. Ignoring the warning signs increases the chance of being unprepared if conditions worsen. Policymakers must also recognize that this time could mark the start of a larger change in the global industrial balance. As supply chains become more fragmented and global tensions increase, countries that previously relied on stable global systems will need to rethink their strategies. If Japan's decline accelerates, other major economies may be forced to adapt quickly, redesign policies, and rethink long-term industrial planning. This period may signal the start of a transition where the distribution of manufacturing power becomes more uncertain and competition intensifies across multiple regions. Japan's caution stands as the clearest signal, yet that something significant is shifting beneath the surface of the global economy. Each reduction in output, each drop in demand, and each alert from its policymakers points to a system that is beginning to strain under new pressures. Japan's difficulties are not unique. They echo through the very supply chains that keep modern industries functioning. In many respects, this moment feels like the canary in the coal mine, providing an early alert before wider disruptions take hold. The question now is whether the world is paying attention. As Japan faces systemic challenges, unpredictable tariffs, and weakening external demand, the United States faces a reality it cannot ignore. If one of its strongest partners falters, the ripple effects will reach American factories, workers, and long-term industrial plans. So we must ask, is the U.S. industrial comeback a solid foundation for the future? Or is it an illusion based on assumptions that no longer match global conditions? If you want more in-depth analysis on global risks, trade shifts, and the forces shaping the next decade, be sure to like this video, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue bringing you the stories that matter.